Have you ever noticed the kindest people in the room are often the loneliest? They give everything, their time, their patience, their love, and somehow they're the ones left standing alone at the end of the night. Why does that happen? Is kindness a weakness, or is something deeper going on? Stay with me, because by the end of this, you will understand exactly why nice people end up alone, and more importantly, how to change it without losing who you are. 1. The silent cost of always saying yes. Sit with me for a moment, not to be entertained, but to be seen. I want you to think back to the last time someone asked something of you and you said yes, even though every part of your body whispered no. Maybe it was small, a favor, a meeting, a conversation you didn't have the energy for. Maybe it was large, a relationship you stayed in, a friendship you kept feeding, long after it stopped feeding you back. Why did you say yes? Most people believe kindness is a gift they give to others, but I want to offer you a different truth, one that took me years of silence, observation, and inner searching to understand. Kindness, when it comes from fear, is not a gift. It is a debt, and debts must be paid, usually with pieces of yourself that you never intended to give away. There is a difference between a yes that comes from abundance and a yes that comes from fear of disappointing someone. The first builds connection. The second builds resentment. Quiet, invisible, growing resentment that you may not even notice until you are exhausted in ways that sleep cannot fix. Think about this. Every time you agree to something you do not want, you are teaching the people around you, and more importantly, you are teaching yourself that your comfort is negotiable, that your peace is optional, that your needs come after everyone else's. And here is the part that no one tells you. The world does not reward this sacrifice the way you hope it will. People do not fall more in love with you because you erase yourself for them. They simply grow used to the space you keep vacating. They stop noticing the cost because you never show it. And slowly, so slowly you may not even feel it happening, you begin to disappear from your own life. I have watched this pattern in people carrying enormous responsibility, and I have felt it in myself. The employee who never says no to extra work, and one day breaks in silence. The friend who is always available, and one day realizes no one asks how she is doing. The parent who gives everything, and wonders in a quiet room who they even are anymore, outside of what they provide for others. This is the silent cost, not visible on the surface, not spoken about in polite conversation, but real, heavier than any physical burden, because it is carried entirely alone. Here is something I want you to understand deeply. Saying yes out of fear does not protect your relationships. It slowly poisons them, because the people who truly value you do not want a version of you that has erased itself to please them. They want you, whole, honest, sometimes inconvenient, sometimes saying no. That is what real connection is built on, not constant agreement, truth. And yet, so many good people never learn this. They confuse self-erasure with love. They confuse endless giving with worthiness. They believe that if they just give a little more, stretch a little further, sacrifice a little longer, they will finally be loved the way they long to be loved. But love, that must be earned through self-abandonment, was never love to begin with. It was survival, dressed up in kindness. So I ask you again, why do you say yes? Is it because you want to, or because you are afraid of what will happen if you don't? The answer to that question will tell you more about your loneliness than anything else in this kindness speech, because the pattern of losing yourself to please others does not stay contained in one part of their life. It spreads, and soon, without meaning to, you begin attracting people who expect exactly this from you, people who take, without ever needing to ask, because you have already trained them not to expect a no. And that is where the real danger begins. 2. Why kindness without boundaries attracts the wrong people. Here is something that may be difficult to hear, but I say it with respect and with care. The people who take advantage of you are not always cruel by nature. Many of them are simply comfortable, and comfort, left unchallenged, becomes habit. If you have spent years being endlessly available, endlessly agreeable, endlessly forgiving, you have, without realizing it, created an environment, And certain people are drawn to that environment, the way water flows toward the lowest point. Not because they are evil, but because it is easy. Kindness without boundaries does not repel bad behavior. It invites it. Think of a boundary not as a wall, but as a filter. Without it, everything flows through. The good, the bad, the genuine, the exploitative, all treated the same. All given equal access to your time, your energy, your heart. And over years, this filterless kindness fills your life with people who are there not because they cherish you, but because you are useful to them. This is one of the most painful truths a good person must eventually face. Not everyone who stays in your life stays because they love you. Some stay because you never taught them they had to earn that privilege. I have seen this so many times. The generous friend who is called only when someone needs something. The reliable colleague whose time is never protected because they never protected it themselves. The loving partner who gives endlessly while receiving only crumbs because somewhere along the way they accepted crumbs as enough. And so the world fills up, not with people who deserve your kindness, but with people who simply never met resistance. Boundaries are not about becoming cold. They are not about pushing people away. A boundary is simply a form of self-respect translated into action. It says, I will treat you well, and I expect to be treated well in return. It says, my time matters, my energy matters, my peace matters. Without this, kindness becomes self-betrayal in disguise. Here is the paradox that most people never discover. Boundaries do not drive good people away. They only drive away the people who were benefiting from your lack of them. And that is exactly how it should be. When you begin to set boundaries, real ones, spoken clearly, held firmly, something remarkable happens. The relationships built on convenience begin to fall away. And yes, this can feel like loss. It can feel like loneliness at first. But it is not loneliness. It is clearing. It is the space being made, deliberately, painfully, necessarily, for people who can meet you as an equal. People who do not need you to shrink in order to feel comfortable around you. People who see your boundary and, instead of resenting it, respect you more because of it. This is the hidden gift inside the discomfort. Boundaries do not just filter out harmful people. They reveal the ones who were never harmful to begin with, the ones who were only waiting for you to value yourself enough to let them. But before you can set a boundary, before you can filter what enters your life, you must ask a harder question, one most people spend their whole lives avoiding. Are you being kind, or are you simply afraid to be seen as anything else? 3. The difference between being nice and being real. This is where everything changes, because nice and kind are not the same word, even though the world uses them interchangeably. Nice is a performance. Kind is a character. Nice says what keeps the peace. Kind says what is true, even when it disturbs the peace, because real peace was never built on silence in the first place. Nice avoids conflict at any cost, even the cost of honesty. Kind can hold conflict, because kindness is not afraid of discomfort. It is only afraid of cruelty. These are very different fears, and confusing them is one of the quiet tragedies of a well-meaning life. Think about the people you deeply respect, the ones whose presence feels solid, grounding, safe. I would guess that very few of them are people who agree with everything you say. I would guess that what makes them trustworthy is precisely the opposite, that they are willing to disagree, gently but honestly, because they care more about your growth than your temporary comfort. That is real. Real is not always comfortable, but real is what builds trust that lasts. Nice, on the other hand, is often a mask worn out of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being disliked. And underneath that mask, there is often a person exhausted from constantly managing how others perceive them, rather than simply existing as they are. Here is the quiet suffering of the nice person. They are loved for a version of themselves that isn't fully true, and some part of them always knows this. Some part of them wonders, if I stopped agreeing with everything, if I said what I actually think, would they still want me here? This uncertainty is exhausting. It is also, in many cases, the root of the loneliness we began with, because you cannot be truly close to people while hiding your true self from them. Closeness requires visibility, And visibility requires the courage to be real, not simply nice. Being real does not mean being harsh. It does not mean abandoning compassion. It means your compassion becomes honest instead of performative. It means you can say, "I don't agree with that," and still say it with warmth. It means you can say, "I need space right now," without feeling that you have failed as a good person. This is not selfishness. This is integrity. And integrity, more than any other quality, is what draws people toward you who are capable of real, lasting connection. Not because you have made yourself easy to be around, but because you have made yourself trustworthy to be around. There is a certain kind of aloneness that comes from being surrounded by people, yet known by none of them. This is the aloneness of the nice person, admired, appreciated, even liked, but never truly seen, because they never allowed themselves to be seen. And there is another kind of solitude, the solitude of someone who has learned to be real, who occasionally stands apart from the crowd, because not everyone can meet their honesty, but who is never truly alone, because the people who remain by choice, not by obligation. This is the shift that changes everything, not becoming less kind, not becoming guarded or hard, but becoming someone whose kindness is no longer a performance rooted in fear, someone whose gentleness is a strength, not a shield. When you stop performing niceness and start practicing honesty wrapped in genuine care, something extraordinary happens. The exhausting effort of managing everyone's perception of you begins to fall away, and in its place, something lighter appears, the quiet, steady presence of someone who no longer needs approval to feel worthy of being here. This is not the end of the path. It is only the beginning of understanding why the kindest people so often walk it alone, and how, without losing their gentleness, they can finally walk it without losing themselves either. 4. How fear of rejection builds invisible walls. Let me ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, even if only in the silence of your own mind. When was the last time you shared how you truly felt, without softening it, without adjusting it, to make it easier for someone else to hear? For many people, the answer is, it has been a long time, perhaps years. And this is not because they have nothing to say. It is because somewhere along the way, they learned that honesty carries risk, that saying the true thing might cost them the relationship. So instead, they built a wall, quiet, polite, invisible, and they have been speaking through it ever since. Here is what no one tells you about walls. They do not just keep pain out, they keep connection out too. You cannot selectively block only the hurtful things while letting the good things flow freely. A wall is a wall. It protects and it isolates, both at once, and most people never realize they are paying for the second while only intending the first. Fear of rejection is one of the oldest fears a human being carries. Long ago, being cast out from the group meant real danger. No protection, no food, no survival. That fear is still written into us, even now, in a world where rejection rarely threatens our survival at all. But the old fear does not know the difference. It reacts the same way, whether the danger is a lion or simply someone disagreeing with your opinion at dinner. So we adapt, we soften our words, we hide our true reactions, we laugh when we want to say something serious, we agree when we want to challenge, and slowly, brick by brick, without ever deciding to, we build a version of ourselves that is safe from rejection, but also safe from being truly known. This is the quiet tragedy I have seen again and again. People surrounded by others, yet unreachable. Liked by many, understood by almost no one. Because the version of them that people meet is the version built to avoid conflict, not the version capable of real intimacy. And here is the deeper cost, the one rarely spoken about. When you hide your true self to avoid rejection, you do not actually avoid it. You simply delay it and disguise it. Because eventually, either the relationship stays shallow forever, held together only by the parts of you that are easy to accept, or the truth eventually surfaces, and the rejection you feared happens anyway, except now it carries the added pain of years spent pretending. There is no version of hiding that leads to being fully loved. You can be liked while hidden. You can be admired while hidden. But you cannot be truly, deeply loved while hidden, because love requires something to actually reach. And a wall, no matter how well built, cannot be reached. I want you to consider this carefully. Every time you choose silence over honesty out of fear, you are not protecting the relationship. You are quietly limiting how close it will ever be allowed to become. This is not something that changes overnight. The wall was not built in a day, and it will not fall in one either. But awareness is where every change begins. The moment you notice yourself softening a truth out of fear, rather than out of genuine kindness, you have already taken the first step past the wall. And what waits on the other side of that wall is not danger, though it may feel that way at first. What waits on the other side is something far more valuable than safety. 5. The moment self-respect becomes your greatest attraction. There is a shift that happens in a person's life. Quiet, often unnoticed by others, but unmistakable from the inside. The moment they stop asking, "Will they like me?" and start asking, "Do I like how I am showing up?" This shift is not arrogance. It is not coldness. It is the birth of self-respect. And self-respect, more than beauty, more than charm, more than achievement, is the quality that draws people toward you in a way that lasts. Think about why. A person without self-respect is constantly seeking approval, constantly adjusting themselves to fit what others want. This creates instability. The people around them can never be sure who they are truly dealing with because the presentation keeps shifting depending on who is in the room. There is nothing steady to hold on to. But a person with self-respect is consistent. They know their values. They know their limits. They do not need constant reassurance, because their sense of worth is not borrowed from other people's past opinions. It is built from within. And this steadiness is deeply attractive, not in a superficial sense, but in the sense that people feel safe around it. They feel they can trust it. They feel they finally know who they are dealing with. Here is something important to understand. Self-respect is not the absence of kindness. It is kindness with a foundation. It is the difference between giving because you choose to and giving because you are afraid of what happens if you don't. The action may look identical from the outside, but internally they are worlds apart, and people can feel the difference, even if they cannot always explain why. When you respect yourself, your kindness becomes a gift, not a plea. You are no longer giving in order to be accepted. You are giving because you have already accepted yourself, and now you have something real to offer from that place of wholeness. This is why self-respect becomes magnetic. Not because it makes you unavailable or distant, but because it makes you real. People are drawn to authenticity, the way they are drawn to warmth on a cold day. Not because it demands attention, but because it is rare, and because something in every human being recognizes it instantly. I want you to notice something. The people you have most admired in your life, teachers, mentors, elders, quiet figures of wisdom, very rarely got your attention by chasing it. They got it by being unmistakably themselves, calmly, without apology. That calm certainty is not something you are born with. It is something you build, choice by choice, moment by moment, every time you choose truth over approval. Self-respect does not mean you stop caring what happens to your relationships. It means you stop sacrificing yourself to keep them. And paradoxically, this is exactly what makes the right relationship stronger, not weaker. Because now, the connection is built on two whole people meeting each other honestly, not one person disappearing to keep the peace. This is the turning point in the entire path we have walked together. Kindness without boundaries invited the wrong people in. Silence built walls that kept real connection out. And now, self-respect becomes the quiet force that begins to change everything. Not by becoming someone new, but by finally becoming fully, unapologetically, who you already were, beneath all that fear. But self-respect alone is not the final destination. It is the doorway. What lies beyond it is something even more important. The ability to hold both gentleness and strength at the very same time. 6. Becoming kind and unshakable at the same time. Here is the truth I want to leave you with, and I want you to carry it with you long after this moment has passed. You were never meant to choose between being kind and being strong. This is the false choice that so many good people have quietly believed their entire lives, that softness and strength cannot exist in the same person. that you must sacrifice one to protect the other. But the most powerful people I have ever encountered were never harsh. They were gentle and unmistakably strong at the same time. Their gentleness was never weakness. It was simply strength that had nothing left to prove. This is what you are moving toward. Not becoming cold to protect yourself from the loneliness we spoke of at the very beginning. Not building higher walls, or trusting less, or loving with more caution. That would only trade one kind of suffering for another. What you are moving toward is something far more balanced. A kindness that is chosen, not forced. A gentleness that comes from strength, not fear. A generosity that flows from abundance, not from the desperate hope of being accepted. This is a person who can say no without guilt, who can speak an uncomfortable truth without cruelty, who can be fully present with another person's pain without losing themselves in it, who can give generously because they have first learned to receive their own self-respect. This person is rarely alone, not because they chase connection, but because they have finally become someone capable of holding it. Relationships no longer drain them, because they no longer abandon themselves to maintain them. And the people who remain in their life are there because they choose to be, not because they were never given the option to leave. This is the real ending to the question we began with. Nice people do not end up alone because kindness is a flaw. They end up alone because their kindness was never protected by boundaries, never spoken with honesty, and never rooted in self-respect. It was kindness without a foundation, and anything without a foundation eventually falls. But you now understand what was missing. Not less kindness, not more distance, simply the courage to be real, the wisdom to protect your peace, and the quiet strength to know your own worth without needing anyone else to confirm it. This is not a destination you reach once and keep forever. It is a practice, returning to it again and again, every time fear tempts you back into old patterns of silence and self-erasure. Some days you will remember, some days you will forget. This too is part of the path. What matters is this. The next time you feel that familiar pull to shrink yourself for someone else's comfort, pause. Remember that real connection was never built on disappearing. It was built on being seen, fully, gently, and without apology. Carry this with you, not as a rule, but as a quiet truth you can return to, again and again, for the rest of your life.